Okay. Sorry, I've jumped one. Why work in a team? As I said, online teaching is different. Course design is critical. Good course design has several things. First of all, it keeps your work down. But secondly, you should get as high completion rates from online courses as you do from face-to-face if you design the courses properly. In fact, you might even get higher ones because you've applied course design to the online part, but not necessarily to your face-to-face teaching. At UBC, we were getting roughly 5% less completion rates for our distance courses, students taking exactly the same exams as the face-to-face students, but 5% less, which is what you'd expect, because these students are often the ones who can't come to campus on a regular basis, have families and so on. Manage your workload, as I said. Share experience and resources, and particularly to help in designing the activities for online activities. Fourthly, build on existing resources. There's lots of tools around. So use the LMS. If you've got Moodle, I think you use Moodle here, then use it. Don't argue. I'll come back to that in a minute. There's a lot of resources out there now. Now, what you will find very frustrating is when you get out there, yes, there's some resources, but it's not quite what you want. And there isn't enough yet, but it's definitely coming. It's coming very rapidly. 3 years ago, if I went to look for how to teach a normal curve of distribution, I would find about 2 or 3 animations out there of a normal curve of distribution. If I go now, there's probably about 30 or 40. And amongst those, there's probably one that will suit my purpose. But in other areas, there's nothing yet. But it will come. So if stuff's out there, use it. And particularly look for things like videos, animations, simulations, and remote labs. This simulation here is from first-year physics. This has been developed at the University of Colorado. They've used Nobel Prize-winning physicists to create these animations. They're free. They're available. You can just download them. You have to download a piece of software to go with them. But the students can actually access this material for free. And build on existing resources because it will save time. Master the technology. 85% of all professors who use a learning management system don't know what it can do. They just know it can do a little bit of what it can do. And most things that you want to do can be done in a learning management system, but you have to know the technology. And the important thing about a learning management system, particularly when you're starting to teach online, is that it provides a structure for you. So certainly take a course on using the learning management system. You may think you know how to use it, but take a course because you'll find it can do lots of things that you didn't know it can do. That's particularly true of Moodle because there are lots of plugins you can have with Moodle. For instance, you can plug in an e-portfolio called Mahara. That will allow students to create portfolios of digital work which you can then use for assessment purposes at the end if you want to. But you need to know that it can do that, and you need to know how to use that piece of software, which is not difficult. The students will use it easily, so you can use it easily too. When you're getting training on the learning management system, keep thinking about how you'd like to teach the subject matter and keep asking the instructor, can I do this on the learning management system? Keep asking, can I get animations and simulations? If I do, how do I drop them into the learning management system? So always relate it to how you want to teach. Design with the service du support formation. Have I got that right? Soutien formation. Work with them to design a course template that fits your needs. You can go into a learning management system. You don't have to take the configuration that they give you. You can actually configure it with a web designer into various ways that will suit your teaching. So if as you say, you want an e-portfolio, then you will want to have activities that students have to do towards the e-portfolio, and you want that clearly in a box that they can see when they log on, so they know what their activities are. So you can get a template that will do just that for you. Don't get into LMS wars. One LMS is not much different from another one. Their functionality is pretty similar. Now, we are seeing some changes in learning management systems, but basically, get on with it. Don't worry about it. Use what you've got. It's like arguing whether, a Honda is better than a Nissan, Well, come on, let's go to work. Get in the car and go. And explore with SSF new tools as they come along. And I'm going to talk a bit about Web 2.0 tools towards the end. Now, this one's probably the most difficult one to explain. Set appropriate learning goals for online teaching. And I'm often asked, why wouldn't you take the goals that you have for classroom teaching and move them online? Well, there are certain things you can do better online. As I said, I started talking about independent learning, knowing where to find information, etc. Well, this is ideal for online learning, right? You're teaching the students to be independent learners. You're asking them to go and find information and analyze it. So instead of you giving the information, ask them to find the information and then evaluate what they come back with. So that's a slightly different goal than you might have in a classroom. And particularly look at the specific internet and IT skills they need to have in the subject area. And that would apply even in humanities, for instance. How to access museums or archival databases in history, etc., etc. And how can you bring those resources into your teaching? Which brings me to the next point. Use online learning to bring in the outside world. I'm a guest instructor on about 5 different programs around the world. I come in and talk specifically about the costs of online learning, for instance, in one course, and so on. So bring in instructors who have a specialism that you don't have, perhaps, but which is really relevant to what you want to do. And also get students to bring stuff in as well. UBC has, University of British Columbia has, you just click UBC Wikis, and now they've got about, I think it's 120 courses with a public wiki. Now, a wiki allows the students, as well as the instructor, to create topics within the course and talk about that, but it's also open to the public. So if you go to look at the Latin American Studies area, you will see it's not only the students from UBC contributing, but also professors from other universities, including from Latin America. So that course has suddenly opened up much more than it would have done if it was just a classroom course. And lastly, be sure to communicate if you're changing the goals or have different goals for, say, what students are used to in a face-to-face class. You must communicate to the students and you must assess them on those goals. So don't give the same exam for the face-to-face class that you might have had if you moved the course online. If you moved to, say, if one of the core skills you're asking from them is to go out and find information and analyze it, then you have to assess them on that and not just assess them on memorization of content, for instance. And now I want to look at the structure. Let's take a 3-credit course. That's easy. 3 lectures a week, right? That converts into roughly, we can argue about this, but roughly 100 hours of online study, which is about 8 hours a week. Now, if you're teaching, if your course is aimed at master's students who are working full-time, don't expect them to be able to do 10 3-credit courses in 1 year, because they can't, right? So you might have to spread that out over 2 years, say, or even over 3 or 4 years. Whereas if they're on-campus students who are supposed to be working full-time, it might be an equivalent. So you have to think about who the students are. But take a 3-credit course, roughly 100 hours of study. So that's the time they've got to work on the course. And then you build the activities and projects and topics around that. Now, you're not limited to having a weekly topic because they don't have to come 3 days a week to class, right? They're not limited by a timetable. So you could have a project that stretches over 3 or 4 weeks quite easily. But you may need to have the work done before the project, and that, again, And don't leave students too long without having an activity that you can give them feedback on, or where you know they're not doing the work, because students, believe it or not, are just as lazy online as they are in class. And so they do need a regular schedule of work, but it doesn't have to be the same as a classroom schedule. Think about the student activities. What must the students do on this course? There are obvious things like read, discuss, collect information, find information, and do things and so on. So work out how they can make it clear to the students what they have to do, because they're as new to online learning as you are, probably, and they need that kind of guidance. Make clear be clear about your learning outcomes and how you're going to assess those outcomes, and then work with the SSF to control your workload. Advanced online course design. If I'm teaching online, my core skill that I'm trying to develop in my students is knowledge management. How can they manage the knowledge in this subject area? How can they continue to learn after they've left? How can they keep up to date in their subject? Where will they go for this information? How will they analyze it? How will they apply it? I would look for as much open content. Get away from me having to deliver all the content. There's textbooks, there's online stuff, and focus on interacting with the students online. Student-generated multimedia content. We'll see in a moment that students can now create content. This is the best way for them to learn, to get them to become the teachers, to teach each other, to find the information. You're in there monitoring it. You have to uphold the quality standards in your subject area. They mustn't get away with sloppy work. That's your job. But they can do the learning. They're the ones who have to do the work, not you. And assessment by portfolios, by getting students to create work and be assessed on that work. Last but one. Communicate with your students. Be present online every day. You know, you probably do this for your email. You go onto your email and you check it every morning before you do anything else. Well, you have to do that with online students. Just go in. Now, if you designed it properly, you shouldn't have a lot of emails from students because they're all working away and they know what to do. But be in there. If there's a discussion forum or a working group and they're going off track, make sure they know you're there and get them online. So what I'm trying to do is transfer your work from delivering information to relating to students. And this is the real benefits of online learning to me. Set clear expectations for students. Tell them what they have to do. Clear learning goals, activities, and deadlines. Really important for online students, as they are for face-to-face students. Make students do the work. Try to respond to any questions within 48 hours, but set expectations. Say, look, I had the weekend off, right? So if you ask me a question at 11 o'clock on a Friday night, don't expect an answer till Monday morning. But if I get a question on Monday, I'll try to get the answer to you by Tuesday at the latest. And so set up those expectations for the students. And monitor the discussion forums. Yeah, the discussion forums can be the best part of the course, but you have to be in there, and they have to know you're there. The one thing that we see all the time from students is, where is my professor online? I get no help. We're out here on our own. There's nobody there. They really notice. And lastly, innovate and evaluate. Those first 8 steps are what we've learned from best practice in teaching. It gives you competency and effectiveness in online learning. However, as we've seen, the demands of students and the demands of the workforce are changing, and the technology is changing. So it's an exciting time to be an instructor and a student because there are new technologies coming along all the time. Mobile learning is an obvious one. And there's a whole set of Web 2.0 tools, like social media and WordPress and new learning management systems that are moving towards what I call more learner-centered teaching, where the learner is more in control than the instructor. In other words, the learner is taking more and more responsibility for their learning, and you're there as a facilitator and a guide more than and telling them, making sure they meet the standards, etc. Though very critical role for the instructor, but it's a different role. So if we look at online learning 2.0, the use of the web, whether you use those new web tools, depends on three things. The needs of your learners, the requirements of accreditation, and that's really important because in some ways the technology is moving ahead of the accreditation agencies. The accreditation agencies are working towards an old 20th century or 19th century model, and the demands out there are moving to something different. And sometimes you can be ahead of the accreditation agencies and they may not recognize what you're doing. Most of them do. I'm on the Ontario Quality Assurance Board for online learning. So when a college or a university wants to move a program online, I go in and assess that. So the accreditation agencies are aware of these changes, but not all of them. And lastly, your educational philosophy, how you believe you should be teaching. I mean, many of you may not want to give up the didactic, I'm the expert, I have the information, you have to learn it as a student, and these are the goals, and so on. I'm not saying you should change from that. But if you want to move to another direction, then you would want to move more into these Web 2.0 tools that give learners more control. And lastly, evaluate and disseminate. One of the things we find is that universities are very bad at boasting about what they do with new technologies. They're used to keeping it in the classroom. If you go to the website, my website, you'll find now that Contact North in Ontario has somebody going around all the universities in Ontario and collecting cases of innovation using new technologies. And nobody in Guelph knew what they were doing in Waterloo. And yet both of them are doing really interesting stuff. So innovate and share if you're doing something interesting. So, next steps. Innovation and evaluation. Sorry, I jumped a slide. The next steps. Make online distance teaching a strategic goal. I think that's been done in this institution. But however, just having a wish is different from actually implementing it. So, I believe the planning for distance education should be done at the academic program level. If you've had a program review, for instance, or if you're wanting to do a new program, then this is a time to bring everybody together and sit down and look at not just the content, but also how we're going to deliver this program and what kind of students we're trying to reach with this program and what are their needs. You need systematic training in teaching and technology if you're going to go the distance education route. You may not need training to teach in a classroom. No, I actually think you do need training to teach in a classroom, but that's another matter. But you certainly need training to teach online because it's different. And you won't have a model in your head because if you haven't done it before. So it's really important to get that training. There needs to be an orientation, I won't say training, but an orientation of doyens, vice-rectors in technology issues and decision making. There's a whole set of decisions to be made about how you're going to support this. For instance, ideally, you should get at least one semester off to create an online course. When I say off, free of classroom teaching, to create an online course. So how's that going to be organized? And how do you make up for that later on? Well, as I said, you get the students to do the work and you spend less time on the teaching yourself, but you have to be there. But, you know, it's a shift in labor. Like everything, when you go to technology, there's a shift in labor. And that has to be recognized at a planning level in terms of if you're going to have a major effort to take a whole program like a master's online, how's that going to be done? There needs to be some investment in planning and design up front before you actually start teaching. Now at UBC, they are running fully cost recoverable master's programs from tuition fees. So the tuition fee covers the full cost of doing the program, including the cost of the professor and the vice president's and the president's office and the sports fields as well. That all comes out of the tuition fees from teaching a master's online. Now, they do that by numbers. They have a lot of students. But to do that, they had to invest $500,000 up front before they got any money in. So that's a big issue for the institution. How are you going to find the resources to get this started? I'm getting away from myself here. And lastly, reward innovation in teaching. Not reward people for going online, but for doing something interesting and new in their teaching. And the rewards for that should be just as much as for being a good researcher. But, of course, we know how the value system in universities operate. But the management can be putting in some rewards here for encouraging people to do things differently, and in class, hybrid, or distance. It doesn't matter, so long as it's innovative and it works, and they're getting better students as a result. So, last steps. And I'm going to go back to French here. I think, yes. Rappelez-vous qu'il y aura toujours des apprenants pour qui la formation à distance ne sera jamais la solution idéale. Rappelez-vous aussi que ce n'est pas tous les sujets ou toutes les parties de votre curriculum qui se prêtent facilement à la formation en ligne. Mais rappelez-vous surtout qu'il y a beaucoup moins d'exceptions que vous le croyez. You can do much more online than you think. Pour faire face à cette nouvelle révolution, il est essentiel de mettre en place un processus de planification qui nous permettra de prendre les bonnes décisions en ce qui a trait à la formation à distance. J'ai dit à plusieurs reprises, et je le dis encore, pour réussir, il faut que les changements graduels au niveau de la formation en ligne se fassent d'abord et avant tout au niveau des programmes. Un engagement vers la formation en ligne doit être pris en fonction de ses bénéfices pour les apprenants, comme la flexibilité et le développement de nouvelles habiletés et de compétences, qui les prépare pour les réalités du XXIe siècle. Il faut se rappeler qu'on sait comment bien enseigner en ligne. Il existe d'excellentes approches, mais il faut savoir aussi comment bien les utiliser. À ce moment-là, notre enseignement en ligne sera aussi bon, sinon meilleur, que notre enseignement en salle de classe. L'utilisation des meilleures pratiques n'est qu'un point de départ. Les technologies de pointe, comme les outils de Web 2.0, ouvrent de nouvelles portes en ce qui a trait aux méthodes novatrices d'enseignement. Il est essentiel pour nous de bâtir sur les acquis, innover et bien évaluer de façon continue ce que nous faisons. Croyez-le ou non, pour le professeur, c'est une nouvelle ère pleine de promesses et de défis, mais pour l'apprenant aussi. Il faut accueillir le changement et le futur de l'éducation à bras ouverts et non timidement sur le bout des pieds. Merci et bonne révolution.
Vous seriez prêt à prendre les questions? Est-ce qu'il y a des questions? Vous êtes révolutionné.
Ouais, j'ai des questions pour vous.
J'en ai dans la salle aussi.